Do you ever feel like your brain has 50 tabs open at the same time? One tab is work, one tab is life decisions, one tab is that awkward thing you said 5 years ago, and another tab is just anxiety for no clear reason. And somehow, none of them ever close. I started noticing something about my mind recently. Even when nothing stressful was happening, my brain still felt busy. Not productive busy, more like restless busy. I would open my phone for a minute and suddenly 20 minutes were gone. Then I'd switch to another tab, then check messages, then think about something I forgot to do. And at the end of the day, I would feel strangely mentally exhausted, even though I hadn't really done anything difficult. Maybe you felt that too, and I think a lot of people around our age are starting to notice this. We grew up in a world where the internet slowly became constant. Notifications, news, social media, endless information. Our brains were never really designed for that level of input. And sometimes it feels like our thoughts never get the chance to settle. There's actually a reason for our minds to feel like this. One big piece of it has to do with dopamine. Dopamine is often called the brain's motivation chemical. But it's not really about pleasure, it's about anticipation. Your brain releases dopamine when it thinks something interesting might happen. And modern technology is incredibly good at triggering that. Every notification, every scroll, every new piece of information creates a tiny dopamine loop. You check something, your brain gets a small reward, and then it wants to check again. Psychologists sometimes compare it to a slot machine effect, because you never know when something interesting will appear. So your brain keeps pulling the lever. Another reason our minds feel overloaded is something researchers called attention fragmentation. Our brains actually prefer to focus on one thing at a time, but today we constantly switch between tasks. Message, email, video, thought, notification. Each time we switch, our brain has to reorient itself. And sometimes, over time, that creates a kind of mental clutter. It's like having dozens of unfinished thoughts floating around in your head, which is why it can sometimes feel like your brain has too many tabs open. And this is where slow activities become interesting. Things like crocheting, knitting, drawing, gardening, even cooking. They are repetitive, they are simple, and they involve your hands. The combination does something powerful for the brain. When you repeat a physical movement, your nervous system can start to settle into a rhythm. Some researchers compare it to a light form of meditation. Not because you're trying to clear your mind, but because your attention has something gentle to rest on. Your hands know what to do, and that frees your mind from constantly jumping between thoughts. There's also research showing that repetitive hand activities can lower cortisol, which is the hormone associated with stress. And it makes sense. When you do something slow and tangible, you're sending your brain a signal that says nothing is urgent and nothing urgent is happening right now. And in a world that constantly tells us to hurry, that signal can be surprisingly powerful. So if your mind never stops racing, here are a few small things that might help. Nothing complicated, just simple habits that give your brain a little breathing space. First, create moments of single tasking. Our brains are much calmer when we do one thing at a time. Even something simple like drinking coffee without checking your phone. Just a few minutes where your attention isn't constantly switching. Second, introduce slow hobbies. They don't have to be productive. Drawing, puzzles, cooking, crocheting, anything where your hands are moving and your brain can relax a bit. The goal isn't perfection, it's just mental rhythm. Third, reduce unnecessary inputs. You don't need to absorb every piece of information. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your brain is simply less scrolling. Not forever, just less. And finally, give your thoughts time to settle. A lot of mental noise disappears when we stop constantly feeding it new information. I think many of us feel like our minds should always be active, always learning, always optimizing, always doing something. But the brain also needs moments where it can just slow down. Not everything in life needs to move at the speed of the internet. Sometimes a quiet activity, a repetitive motion, a few minutes without input is enough to remind your nervous system what calm actually feels like. So, if your mind has been racing lately, maybe the answer isn't trying to control every thought. Maybe it's just giving your brain a slower rhythm for a while. And sometimes something as simple as this is enough to start.